All right, hello everybody. Welcome to The Struggle Is Not Real, the show where we basically take these popular myths and mystify them, and make sure that you can overcome the things that get in your way to being productive and creating the life that you want to have. I think that's really important, and that's what today's all about. Because we're talking about when I see the word equality, though, I think my brain automatically goes to not this topic. It goes to maybe things on a bigger scale, and the conversation about equality and fairness and the relationship there. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about balance. That's what we're talking about today, and it should be a really good show. I'm joined as always by the queen of coaching, Kristin Tabbert, and New York Times bestselling author of the 12-Week Year, Michael Lennington. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Yeah, just been is it a beautiful, or is it still winter up in Michigan? Hello?
I cannot hear you, Kristin.
Yeah. Did we lose Kristin's mic?
Normally Mike does that to me.
It was working like 5 seconds ago. Oh, there she's back.
I was playing around with my mouse trying to get my Instagram to go live, and somehow I muted myself.
I may have muted you and then didn't unmute you. Hopefully that's not the case, but I'm glad. So anyway, yeah. So what's the weather like up there in Michigan?
Yesterday was beautiful. Today it's overcast. It's going to start raining, and tomorrow we're supposed to have ice.
Well, there it is. Just you never know what's going to happen.
You know the expression, if you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes. That's Michigan.
There it is.
It's the only state where you can get sunburn and frostbite all in the same day.
I got the privilege today of sending Kristin a referral, which always makes me happy.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Kristin, tell people a little bit about like what it is that how you help people.
That's really great. So, I just spent a few minutes trying to develop a little intro video for this referral. And it started out with the easy thing to tell you about is we use the cornerstone of the 12-week year to set goals and measure progress. The hard thing to do is tell you exactly what I do. It's more on the behavioral side of things. So, you almost go too deep sometimes. So basically what I do is I crawl inside your head. I rewire your neural pathways for you, create better optimal thinking paths so you can live the life of your dream. There, that wasn't too bad.
That's pretty good. Yeah. And Michael, what would you say Kristin does?
I was just thinking about somebody crawling inside my head. I've met people like that wasn't very good, but Kristin is actually very gentle about that. And she doesn't get in your head. She just forces you to look at it. And
there it is.
It's good and not good.
Well, today I think we're going to dive into one of those concepts where Kristin does have to dive into someone's head and help them understand, wrap their whole brain around it. I know a lot of times when I talk about the 12-week year, people say I don't have time for the 12-week year. They think they're taking an entire 12 weeks and dedicating to this big one audacious goal, and they have no other life. So today we're diving into this concept that I think that many of us strive for, but find very elusive, and that's balance. Specifically, we're going to deconstruct the idea that balance means an equal distribution of our time and energy across all areas of our life. But let's take a step back. Where did this notion of equality as balance even originate? You see, the concept of work-life balance as we understand it today is relatively recent phenomenon. It really started gaining momentum in the latter half of the 20th century as society industrialized and the lines between work and home life became more defined for many. The need to consciously manage these separate spheres became apparent. The shift, while bringing about certain advantages, may have inadvertently planted the seed for this idea that all these distinct parts of our lives, career, family, personal interests, should ideally receive equal attention. It's almost as if we began to believe that fairness in life meant an even split of our most precious resource, time and energy. So think about it in the societal structure as the societal structure has evolved. And I am very intrigued because I think what's really happening today is now where we had the separation of work-life balance. Like we went from, you woke up and you worked on your farm and blah, blah, blah. And the farm kind of consumed your whole life to the industry happening. And then we had very clear, I'm at work or I'm at home. And now since COVID, it's all gotten blurred again, right? We're back, people working from home, and there's very little definition of when does work start and when does home start? And this whole idea of balance gets thrown up in the air again. So, Michael, I know you have a great answer for this because I know exactly what you believe, and there's really no such thing as balance, right? We know that that's not true. So how is balance? How's the idea of balance as a quality? How's it flawed and counterproductive?
Yeah, I think, balance is kind of a characteristic of physical things, right? You could put stuff on a balance to figure out if they weigh the same, but that's not how we live our lives. And I think when we look at balance is intentionality, right? So what are you intentional about? What's important in this series, this season, this period of time? And given that intentionality, it's kind of like intentional imbalance. There are going to be times when you spend more time at home, spend more time in certain relationships, other times when you've got to do some things at work and it's going to require more time. And so it's when we get this kind of ideal thought, right? Where you were saying, Mike, is you've got to have somehow this kind of balance that's an ideal to shoot for. It's really doesn't work for us. And I think what's important though is that you have seasonality too, where sometimes you're going to be focused mostly on business, sometimes you're going to be focused mostly on the personal stuff, and that kind of seasonality, it allows you to balance your life out a little bit more effectively, I think. But in the moment, you can be way out of balance but still be intentional.
Yeah, Kristin, I think there's very few people that ever feel like they're perfectly in balance, right? Because it's a constant idea of balancing, and you're constantly shifting from one to the other. And maybe at the end of the day, you can look back at your life and say, you know what, I was pretty balanced. But how do you help people? How do you help clients with this idea?
Well, to what Michael said, we live in a world now where you don't punch in at 8 o'clock in the morning and punch out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And so especially if you're working remotely and you're at home, everything is blurred. Those lines are way, way blurred. And so it's an easy concept to compartmentalize the time spent doing the things you need to do, but it's not always easy to practice an application. If you are a remote worker, those days the hours can bleed into midnight. I mean, it's so easy to just one more thing. It's not like you have to rush home, get in the car, beat rush hour, do those things. It's not like you're being paid by the hour and you're punching out at the end of the day. We start to attach the time spent to our success. And sometimes that means, oh, well, I have to work longer. I have to work harder. And there's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of flawed thinking around all of that.
And to me, it really takes maybe not working harder, but working smarter, right? And so I'll go to how this shows up in the real estate industry all the time. And I'm going to use the case of, a very common person who gets into real estate is the mom whose kids are big enough to go to school, and now she wants to get back in the workforce, and she likes the flexibility, right? We know getting in the real estate world, there's this idea that it's flexible hours. I can make my own schedule and unlimited income and all this other kind of stuff. And but if you don't put the structure around that to some degree, you end up having a very common thing that happens among women in our industry of never feeling like they're doing good enough as a realtor and never feeling like they're doing good enough as a mom. And they're constantly beating themselves up because they don't feel like they're serving either one of those circles very well.
Everything always starts with your thinking, Mike. How you think about anything is how you're going to take the action and then the outcomes you're going to get. So if you think real estate is going to be easy and it's going to be flexible and you're going to do it between school hours, yeah, you can. I mean, sure. It does allow that flexibility. But then to your point, what happens is, well, Jane over here is doing 60 transactions a year and she's killing it. And I'm over here struggling with just a couple of transactions, but you're not looking behind the scenes and looking at the detail. How much is Jane working after midnight? How often is she on her phone? How much time is she losing with her family? How imbalanced is she really? Everything has consequences to your actions. So your choices you make in terms of how you want to execute will dictate the outcomes you get. Are those the outcomes you want? Are they realistic to the life that you have in front of you right now?
And I think that's interesting from what I heard you just talk about. Like the first thing that came up is that, you're comparing, is the trap of comparing yourself and success versus someone else's success, right? Looking at this Jane person, and maybe for you, and I guess this goes back to my point of being intentional. Like Chrissy and I made sure that one of us was able to pick up our kids every day at 3:00 and that we were going to have family dinner together. Right. So that's where we chose to take some wins when it looked like for us to be intentional. Of course, sports schedules got in the way of that more than real estate did. But the reality is like, hey, we were there to pick up our kids. We were there. We had this time in the middle of the afternoon where we could kind of block out and know that we were going to spend time with them. But you know what? That we might have to go do an appointment in the afternoon or after dinner or something like that. That's just, it was part of it. And it's because I do think you can systemize a lot of that success too, right, Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. And I got to say, something you just said, Mike, triggered a thought for me. And if you don't mind, I got to diverge on that for a second.
Sure. That's what we do here.
Remind me of it. By the time I come back to it, I'll forget what you asked me. But
yeah,
it's kind of the have to, choose to, right?
Yeah.
Well, we often have this mindset of I have to go do this, I have to go that, but actually everything we do is a choice, and we're making a choice based upon a certain set of criteria to make us, whether we do something or not do something. And some people are alcoholics. They're workaholics. Some of them are alcoholics too. Sometimes alcoholics, workaholics, whatever. But most people aren't alcoholic workaholics. So let's just stick with workaholics. The concept of workaholic is that I like to work. I want to work. It's what I do. It's what I choose to do. And you can kind of pretend to be a victim to it, but sometimes we make those choices because that's where we want to go. Other people don't like work. They want to avoid work if at all possible. So there's extremes to that spectrum. And I think when we talk about work, it's really where we choose to do things that need to get done because we have a bigger outcome we're after, right? And so when we shift away from this have to do stuff versus get to do stuff or choose to do stuff, it changes the mentality quite a bit. And regardless of where you fall on that spectrum of workaholic to laissez-faire, kind of taking it easy mindset, I think that if you realize you always have choice, it kind of takes the burden away a little bit. I'm choosing to do this thing because I want to make this happen for my family, or I want to make this happen in the world or whatever. And it makes it less onerous, I think.
It's kind of funny because I feel like that, that workaholic, not workaholic thing, obviously there's people could define that for themselves individually, but as an overall society, I think it ebbs and flows. And like we're going into this idea, hey, I want to, be a social influencer and basically not do a whole lot and get paid a whole lot of money for not doing much. Right. And I think that it's really interesting to me because I think that's a pretty prevalent feeling amongst, not the millennials, but the generation below the millennials, whatever they are, is like, hey, I'm going to figure out how to make the most amount of money with working the least. And in some ways, that's kind of what the 12-week year is all about.
Yeah, it is in a sense. And I was just talking to a couple of friends of ours, Jim Oliver and Nick Costco, and they had this view about.
I don't know those guys.
Well, yeah, I should have said friends. I'm kidding. They're my friends. They may not be Mike's friends, but anyway, the thing about it is that they talk about this concept of you're selling your time for money, right? And so you have a finite amount of time, so you can only earn so much money unless you start doing something else. But my point is that that's how people think the world works, and they have a different view of that. You don't necessarily have to sell your time for money. You can retain your time and still drive revenue, but you've got to do it in an intentional way. And I think, we sometimes get ourselves in traps of our own construction, right? We don't really think there's a way out when in fact there is. And I think that thinking differently, you're kind of just alluding to it. I think that thinking differently is a powerful way to live the life you want to live, and you're never a prisoner except for your own thinking. I think generally our thinking is what creates our prisons.
Yeah, and that limitations that you put on yourself, Kristin, sometimes let you give away your time a little too freely. And the concept, I think, where what Michael just talked about, because I think he maybe used the word allocation. I'm not sure, because you like to say it's not time management, it's time allocation. And if people did have that intentionality and they did invest their time the way that they are taught to invest money, of course, most people don't invest their money very well either, I guess. Maybe not the greatest analogy, but if they had that same kind of general understanding about investing of time, their money wouldn't even be a problem, would it?
No, it wouldn't. And it's funny that you said that, because I said that to a prospective client the other day. I said, if you budget your time the way you budget your money, how much different would your life be? And they said, my budget's a disaster, so my life's going to be a disaster if I do that.
Yeah. So let's get into some of this practical application stuff that we can really go on to, like how you actually make the decisions on basically what does get the investment of your time. And it starts right now, Kristin, with the idea of really understanding your values and your priorities. Talk about that for us.
So it's easy to in theory to talk about these are the most important things that I should be doing. And I should just be able to put them in my calendar and do those things. And the imbalance will be exactly the way I want it to be. But life doesn't work like that. And then we get stuck in these mental models and these blurred lines of not being able to really differentiate anymore what is a priority and what's not a priority, because you have kids in your life, they're going to take precedence. Something's going to happen, and you're going to be on demand. And so I think it starts with, if you can't make it work on paper, you'll never make it work in the real world. So the 12-week year and the allocation of time allows that to happen. So put it on paper first. If it doesn't work in paper, you're never going to figure it out in real life.
And quite honestly, that's one of those things you have your clients do is map out their ideal work week, right?
Right.
And how often is someone actually able to stick to what that ideal work week is?
They're not. It'll never be 100%. I mean, if you actually get a week where you adhere to your time blocks 100%, go get a lottery ticket, because you've got some really good fortune in your life. But what I like to use is kind of that Pareto rule is, if you can adhere to your ideal work week 70-80% of the time, you've got a really structured work week that's going to work well for you.
Yeah. Can I add that real quick, Mike?
Yeah, go for it.
Be fast. So, one of the things that you're talking about, Kristin, is intentionality, right? So, like in the weekend, if I go home on the weekend after a long week of work, and I go home and all I want to do is just veg, right? At the end of that weekend, exactly what I intended, it will have happened, and I will have gotten nothing done. If I instead go home for the week and say, I want to have some time with my kids, each one of them independently by themselves. I want to spend time with my wife, maybe take her out to dinner. I want to do these things intentionally over the weekend. Then I may not get it all done, but I know on Sunday night when I look back at it, I will have accomplished a lot more of that stuff. And so it's the intention that kind of fills the week, and some things get in the way. Sometimes unexpected events occur. So you never quite work to the model work week perfectly, but if you don't have it at all, you're going to be reacting like Brownian motion, just going to go wherever the world moves you. And you're going to tread water and not really make progress in many areas, if any at all.
And if you're not setting your intention and you're not actually plugging it into a calendar, work expands to the time we have available. So if you
Parkinson's law.
Yes, if you do not put some boundaries around time for the things that you want to get done, it's going to be ever ongoing, and you'll just procrastinate into infinity. And
this is exactly like how it shows up in my life, right? So, I'm stepping out of production. I'm doing more leadership stuff, more training stuff with my agents. I have to have these self-imposed deadlines to get things done, because I start working on a project and my creative brain starts working on 5 other projects while I'm supposed to be working on this one project. And you're wired a lot like that too, Michael, right? So like, things start like, I'll end up trying to focus on one thing, and I'll end up creating 5 new things inside of that whole mentality. And then you get the other side of the spectrum too, Kristin, because you have your ideal work week all mapped out, but not all those time blocks are created equal. So like, maybe you got the checklist type stuff done, but you ignored those major tactics that happened in the week. And you could still be 70% on your ideal work week and not get them stuff that need to be done. You don't address the work that actually moves you forward, I guess.
Yeah, it's clarity and intentionality. It doesn't get any simpler than that. What's the most important things, and when are you going to do them today? And did you do them in the time you set forth to do those? It's 3-legged formula that'll lead you to daily success. But the problem with it, and there is a problem, the problem's not the problem, scheduling. The problem's how you're thinking about the problem. It's that choice piece. I don't feel like doing that today. I don't want to do those things. That's hard. Somebody needs my attention. I'll use that as an excuse to pull myself away. Was it really that urgent? So it's not whether or not you can block time for the most important times. It's whether or not you can change your thinking to connect that the most important thing is the thing I need to get done, because there will be longer term consequences. I won't have that life I want. I'm not going to have the relationships with my kids. There will be a lot of consequences.
And you got to stop majoring in the minors. Go ahead, Michael.
Well, no, I didn't mean to cut you off, Mike. But I wanted to add what you were saying, Kristin, because there's this mindset about work being unpleasant and difficult. But it is sometimes. It's drudgery. I don't feel like doing this. I got to confront something I want to confront, whatever it is. And when you just look at the work, the cost of that it can be, some of the work is fun. I get that done, no problem. Some of the difficult stuff that I don't like to do though. And it's to frame that work, not in the context of the work itself, but to kind of look for what's the purpose of this tactic in my plan? What does that let me do? I need to see the vision I have. I need to see those goals that I have for my life and for, the things that are important to me through that work. Cause that's stuff that I need to do in order to make that happen. And we call that in the 12th degree, we call that greatness in the moment. And it's important because, we can front end our greatness. The end result, getting more money or whatever, that's delayed, but we can be great right now. And that mindset of greatness, every time we take one of those difficult tactics and get them done, celebrate them, stop, recognize it, feel good about it, and get used to doing, kind of giving you that little endorphin bump at the end or even in the middle of it is important to let you engage with the stuff you don't like to do. Because typically the things you're avoiding is keeping you from accomplishing what you're capable of.
This is actually the new basketball coach at Kentucky, Mark Pope. This is the quote that he's talking about all the time. He's like, the magic you are searching for lies within the work you're avoiding. That's what he keeps on talking about. It's like everything, like those hopes and dreams and everything that you got, they all were right there in the work that you're avoiding. And I used to talk to people that your dreams are actually on the other side of your fears. Like you got to get through whatever kind of scary stuff you're working on. But I want to take this in a slightly different direction. Kristin, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I'm good. Go.
We talked a little bit, we've been talking about the time, but I think when people map out their ideal work week, like they almost always assume that their energy is at the same level 100% of the time, 100% of the day. And they never really, well, I shouldn't say never because that's an absolute, but most people don't really understand how they have to manage their energy and refill their cup and what they've got to do and how that looks. What does that look like for your clients, Kristin?
It happens all the time. And again, it comes back to the comparison thing. We watch what other people do. And, Fred over here is killing it at 40 hours a week. He's just knocking out the stuff and he just does it. And here I am, I'm over here struggling, to even get out of bed in the morning sometimes. So we've got to have an understanding of what our natural rhythms are. Some people are night owls. Some people are morning people. So don't measure your progress or your expectations if you're a night owl to somebody who is a morning person. And as an adult, you have a pretty good understanding of what your natural rhythms are. And if you don't, then find somebody to help you. We can map those patterns and we can start seeing when you're optimal. If you need a nap in the afternoon, go take a nap in the afternoon and don't beat yourself up for it. It just means that I might sleep from 3 to 5 and then have a really productive time from 9 to midnight. And that's okay. You don't have to take your natural rhythms and try to force them into societal 9 to 5 mentality.
Michael, you got something to add there?
Well, I just was thinking that's what I did yesterday.
Yeah. I
took a nap. Yeah. And that's what Chris was probably talking about. I took a nap in the middle of the day. I was tired, right? In my age, I'm a geezer, you get tired, but, that's another thing that's happened because of COVID. We've got more flexibility sometimes if we're working from home to do that sort of thing. But then I worked till about midnight last night and, it wasn't work. I wasn't doing it. I needed to do it. And it was enjoyable though. But I just needed that burst of energy that I got from the nap because I was drained at about 2:00 in the afternoon. I was just kind of in a doldrum and took a nap. Changed everything.
Kristin, I'm going to share something that hopefully you're okay with me sharing, but you have got to learn how to do this too, because you have Lyme disease, right? So how does that show up in how you have to manage your time and energy and you still get those priorities done? Because life doesn't stop just because you have Lyme disease.
No. And that's a great question. And there's a statement in the Lyme world that says Lyme does not reward extra effort. And actually, the opposite of that is true. The harder I try to push through and suck it up buttercup, the worse my outcomes are going to be. And the thing that I'm trying to avoid, not showing up for people, getting my work done, I manifest negative outcomes in spades for that. So boundaries are very, very important in what I do. And I am the worst offenders of my own boundaries because I war with, gosh, I know I can do this thing. I can help these people. I'll just one more thing and one more thing. And my profile, as we talk about profiles, I'm perpetual. It doesn't mean that I'm not the Energizer Bunny, which, yeah, I do have that energy, but it means I don't see time in minutes. I see time in finished projects. So I will go and go and go, and I will exhaust. I will exhaust myself, and then I collapse. So boundaries, I have to really adhere to boundaries. And because I'm not good at it, I have to make sure that my major circle of influence, my major support network, boomer, is coming in and saying, you're done for the day. Get out of your office. No, we're not doing that right now. That can wait until, we look at the priorities and decide that's not a priority today. We'll push that to tomorrow.
Yeah, I was going to say that living with me makes that dealing with Lyme a lot easier for you, doesn't it?
It does. No stress whatsoever.
Yes. I'm only gonna laugh because I know you all so well. So Michael, talk a little bit more about the importance of boundaries and just in this whole conversation of helping us have some semblance of balancing in our life.
Yeah, a lot of times people have a hard time saying no to other people, because they feel like it's going to damage the relationship. But if you can't say no, your yes becomes meaningless and it's going to damage the relationship. And so boundaries are important. And it's, we can sometimes equate it with selfishness, but it's not, because we know ourselves. We know sometimes when we can deliver, when we can't. And if we don't have boundaries, we're just going to get worn down, because people will take advantage of that. People won't notice it, and so it's important to be your own defender, your own champion.
All right, so I'm going to try to sum up this whole episode real quick and just kind of make sure that we are really clear, because I think this topic is very, very important. And right now you've got to take a look at what your natural rhythms are. How does your energy flow? What's very important to you? What has got to be a priority? And when we talk about priorities, you can only have a couple priorities. Is it priority the word that used to not have a plural until recently? Is that correct? Am I making that up?
No, that's absolutely true. I think until 1940 something, it may have even been a little later. In Merriam-Webster's dictionary, there was only singular. It was priority, and the definition of that, there were no such thing as, think about it. It's an oxymoron. How can you have multiple priorities if priority means the one and only most important thing?
And I think that at the end of the day, like I go back to the end of the movie, The Incredibles, with the guy popping up and he's like, if everyone's special, then nobody is. And it's the same thing with priorities, right? Like if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. If you're saying, go ahead, Kristin.
They can't be equal.
It cannot be equal. It cannot be equal. But you have to have a very clear understanding of what your priorities are. And then you have to understand that there's going to be seasons and phases in your life when one of those priorities is going to require more time and energy and attention than the other things. And there will be a time when those other things will require more time and energy and attention. But the key piece here is that you have the boundaries in place so that your time and energy is not being given away to things that are not a priority or supporting the life that you want to create.
Yeah. And I think, sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm done.
Well, the concept of urgent and importance are not the same, and yet urgent things become priorities over the important things. So, what is a priority? Is it just because it's time urgent, or is it because it's really important in my life in the long run? Right. So, your view of time and when you're optimizing your life, and I think most people just don't think about that. They just react to the urgencies, and the priorities take a back seat because they're not urgent, and you end up working on the non-priorities. And so. And I know I'm using the word plural priorities because I was born after that dictionary was written, and it's my prerogative to do that. But the bottom line is that, we can only really focus on one thing and in the moment, right? One thing at a time. We're not good at fast switching.
Well, and multitasking. This is a whole nother episode, and I won't go too deep with this, but there was a time when, people thought they found multitasking to be a real skill set when it's not. Just to your point, Michael, you can't. If it's important and you need to get these specific outcomes in a specific time frame, you need a singular focus. Otherwise, you're going to have mediocre at best results, and that is at best. I'd argue you won't even get mediocre.
I want to kind of go back a little bit because and I almost said this when Kristin gave her opening statement when she was talking, but you mentioned something about It's the thing, and this is very true with priorities. Lots of times people have priorities that they think they should be their priorities, or someone else has those priorities for them. Like, talk about that a little bit, Kristin.
Yeah, it's the courage to confront the priorities. Other people's opinion of us is none of our business, but we dictate our days and our tactics and our goals and our vision all around how we think other people will perceive us if we say these things, or if I do this thing, it's going to make other people, have this opinion of me. And it has to come back to you and you alone. What is it you want? What are you willing to do to get there? What are you willing to commit to? And you have to shut out the rest of the noise. And that means you're going to let people down. You're going to tell people no. You're going to piss people off. There, I swore again. Oh, that's 2 weeks in a row.
I think we're okay with pissed.
Okay.
Off is not really.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good with that.
All right. And it doesn't matter. All it matters is if this truly is your priority, then you'll do the things to do it. But you've got to have the courage to confront your own thinking, your own desires.
And what brought that back up to the surface for me, that concept, was when Michael started talking about urgency, because lots of times we let someone else's urgency become our priority. And that can derail your day big time. So any closing thoughts before we wrap it up for today?
No, I'm just going to keep reiterating, the problems you think you have are not the problems. It's how you think about your problems.
100%. Michael, anything to add?
I just agree with Kristin.
It's always
my priority. Right now, that's my priority.
Okay, this is recorded. Everybody's heard this.
Well,
I'm going to hold you to this.
We are flying through these episodes. Like we have tipped past the halfway point now of our 15 episode thing. So next week will be episode 9, and this is very appropriate because, and it actually probably should have been the episode we did last week, because it says talent is not enough. And I think that's an interesting thing to couple with the NCAA tournament, because I love when we have these. Now, it hadn't been the case this year. Of course, we're in a basketball junkie place in Kentucky where I am. But every year you hear about Cinderella upsetting the team with all the talent. And so I'm very intrigued about hearing your all's thoughts on that conversation, because it's very true. Sometimes there's these other intrinsic factors that can have the less talented people win all the time. So until then, we will talk to you guys later. Have a good day.